So today we are going to be making crepes. So this is a pretty simple recipe, and the version that I'm going to do is going to have bananas and Nutella in it, but it's basically a recipe that you can put whatever you want in the middle. When I was a kid, my parents used to cook down fruit, so we would have cooked strawberries or berries or apples or any of those sorts of things. So I'm going to go over how to make the basic crepe. Whatever you put in the middle is going to be up to you, and then at the end I'm going to show you a couple of different techniques that we have for plating them. As I was saying before, this is a very simple recipe. You have 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour. I put my quarter of a teaspoon of salt in there. It's basically just a few shakes of the salt shaker. You just need a little bit in there. I have my 3 tablespoons of butter, my 3 eggs, 3/4 of a cup of water, and also 3/4 of a cup of milk. What I want to do is add things gradually, and even though it's a very simple recipe, the technique is going to be fairly difficult. I've taught this many times, and usually when I do it in class, about 50% do it right and 50% do it wrong. You don't want to rush putting your liquids in, otherwise it doesn't mix in properly and you get all these chunks of flour, and that just doesn't work out properly. So what we're going to do is just gradually add things out until it creates a bit of a paste, and then we're going to thin that out. So the first thing we do, you're going to have to make sure you have a wooden spoon or something tough to stir the beginning part with, and also make sure you have a whisk. I know I've said in the past you can use a fork instead of a whisk, but this is one of those times you really do want to have a whisk because it'll be the best way of mixing this together. So I'm just going to give this a bit of a stir to mix my salt in a little bit. Should be fine. And then the next thing I'm going to do, according to my directions, is add in my milk and my eggs. So I'll just add the eggs to the milk. I can beat those up a little bit easier. And then use my whisk to try and create a bit of a smoother mixture before I start adding it in. Okay, so that should be good. I'm just going to add that into the flour mixture, and I'm going to use my wooden spoon to mix this at first. I might be able to use the whisk, but at this point it might be a little bit too thick by the time I get to the end, and I am trying to make a nice smooth paste. Alright, so give this a good mix with your spoon. If you have a stand mixer and you use the, it looks like it's thin enough, you could use the whisk attachment to it. That would probably be a good way to go. I gave it a couple more minutes of stirring, so it's pretty smooth now. There's a few little lumps in there, but it shouldn't be too bad for what we're doing. So let's clean this off a little bit. The next thing I'm going to do, use my whisk, and I'm going to slowly incorporate the rest of the water and the butter. Okay, so make sure you just add a little bit at a time. It says it's about a tablespoon, so just add a little bit of this. You want to make sure that you mix it in fully before you add any more. So right now I have this as a bit of a really thin paste. If you've made pancakes before, this is basically like a thin pancake batter by the time you're done. Okay. So the key to making this is just not going too fast. Okay, I just want to slowly thin this out and just take my time with it. If I start adding the liquids in too fast, it gets chunky, and then when you make the crepes, they won't really be smooth anymore because you're going to have all these little chunks that are going to just cook the way they are. Just going to add the last of the water, so there's just a little bit left here. And I'm also going to put in my butter. So this is my melted butter. go. Give that one final whisk. At this point you can see it's a very, very thin batter. This is what we wanted. When you make the crepes in the frying pan, you need it to be very thin just so it'll spread out really easily and make a thin layer on the bottom of the pan. Okay. So that should be good. One of the things that you can do to check out whether or not you have a lot of lumps or get rid of some of the lumps is just to strain it. So I have a strainer here, and I'm just going to strain it into this 1 liter measuring cup. All right, so it's thin enough that it should go through pretty easily. So this is just kind of a safety protocol, or just a way of double checking to make sure you don't have a lumpy mixture. So I have a little bit left in here, and that's perfectly fine. If that's all that I have, then that's good. Okay, sometimes you'll have some bigger chunks and you'll be glad that you got rid of those. So now that I've strained those out, the rest of my batter is going to be smooth. So here's my frying pan. It is warming over medium heat. I'm just going to spray a little bit of oil on it. I want to make sure this is well coated just so that my batter doesn't stick to the bottom. In here, you really want to make sure that you have a non-stick pan. So the batter is going to form a very thin layer, and you want it to be able to release it very easily. I sprayed this pan just because even though it's non-stick, it really isn't a great non-stick pan. So it needs the extra oil just to make sure that things don't stick to it. If you're using, I know you don't always have a choice of what kind of pan you have at home. If you don't have a non-stick and you just have a straight up stainless steel one or a cast iron pan, those will also work. Just make sure you do oil the bottom of them. So this one should be good, I believe. It asks for about a 1/4 cup of mixture, so I just have my 1/4 cup here. You can use that. So when you put the batter in, you want to try and move it around so that it coats the bottom. Okay, so just give it a little round. See, I'm not quite hot enough yet, I don't think. I'm just going to add a little bit more on the sides here. But I'm not quite hot enough yet. That's why this one isn't going very well. Okay. Okay, so as it's going, I try and just move it around to try and fill in some of those thinner spots and make the coverage a little bit more full. So I believe that should do. So I'm going to say start off with a 1/4 cup, add a little bit more if necessary. I have 2 tools that I'm going to use here. So I still have my spatula. I'm going to wipe that off a little bit. But I also have a plastic flipper. Okay. The spatula is nice to be able to loosen it around the edges, and then the flipper I can just get underneath and flip it easily. So it's been a couple minutes. I was trying to figure out why it was so slow and realized that my burner had turned off. Yeah. Anyway, right here, if you take a closer look, you can see that it's starting to change color. Try and get rid of some of the shadows. Okay, so it's a little hard to see. So this lighter part here is going to be where the batter isn't quite cooked, and then this over here where it's getting darker is the color it turns as it starts cooking. So don't get discouraged if it starts taking a while, or if your first one doesn't turn out awesome. It's a bit hit and miss sometimes. So once you get the hang of it, you should be good. At this point, I'm just going to move that over so it'll cook a little more. I'm going to use my spatula to just loosen up the edges a little bit. Okay. Just kind of push that the cooked part back in. And once it gets to the right point, I'm going to try and flip it. So I left it for about another minute. I don't know if you can hear it, but there's a little bit of sizzling underneath. Okay, so you should hear like a very, very light sizzling, and that'll be the crepe cooking on the other side. So at this point, I'm going to try and get underneath of it and flip it over. To do that, I'm going to want to get one of the thicker points, so it's a little bit thicker on this end. And because this is non-stick, I can just kind of coax it down a little bit, like that, and then get underneath. Okay. And then whoop, flip it. There you go. So it's a little bit difficult until you get used to this, but if it rips a little bit or you have a little bit of a hard time flipping it over, it's okay. As you do more of these, it'll be more obvious as to when to flip it and how to flip it and all that. I might have done it a little bit early just because this side isn't quite done yet, but we'll play with it a little bit on the next go around. I flipped that one over again. It's getting a little difficult to work with because I have a pretty significant tear there, but at this point I'm pretty much done. So it is a lightly browned color in some spots, so that should be good. The nice thing about having this being non-stick, I can just slide it right out of the pan, like so. Okay, so I still have a good amount of oil in here, so I can get started on the next one. The pan is hotter, so hopefully it'll set faster. And just move it around. There we go. So in that one, I did about one quarter cup scoop, and then did about a half or a third of a scoop on top of that just to fill it in. So as you do this, you'll notice they stay flat. They don't puff up or anything like that. That's because you don't have any baking powder or baking soda or any sort of leavening agent in there. So despite what Ricky Bobby thinks, crepes are not little pancakes. Okay, if you've ever made pancakes, you know that they have baking powder or soda in there, so they fluff up. These ones are meant to be completely flat. So you can see that one turned out better. The first one usually is kind of a dud, so don't get too concerned if your first one doesn't turn out the way that you wanted it to. Alright, so same thing. Now that I get to this point, I'll just loosen that up a little bit. This one is cooking significantly faster than the last one, and it's staying much more solid underneath. I'm just going to leave that for a little bit, just to make it solidify a little bit more, to try and avoid getting any more rips. Alright, so it only took like another 30 seconds or so, so here it's nice and loose, and I could probably flip it if I wanted to, but I'm just not going to. So just like what we did with the tortillas, that's sitting together a lot nicer. Yeah, so when you look at it, you have that nice light brown color on there. So I'll just put this in for probably another 30 seconds or so, and just like the tortillas, just stack them on top of each other. It'll help keep the moisture in between the layers to help keep them soft, which will be important because we're going to put stuff in the middle and then we're going to fold them. If I leave them all individually and they start to dry up, it's going to be a lot more difficult to make something out of them. Okay, so just keep following this procedure, and I'll meet you up at the end when we are done all the dough and are going to start doing our folding. Okay, I lied a little bit. I'm going to do one more. So when you're doing this, what you want to do is make sure that this is nice and hot. You'll notice that when I put the batter in, I take it off the heat just to make sure it's not as intense as I try and spread it out. And I'm going to go around just to coat, but then whenever I see a thinner part, I'm going to go back around to get an extra layer of batter on that part. Okay, so again, I'm going to go for a scoop and a half. Okay, and then go around to coat. Okay, and then the outer edge here is a little bit thin, so I'm going to go back around there to try and coat that. But you can see that it starts to thicken up really quick. That's part of the reason why I take it off the heat. If I leave it right on the burner, it's a little bit harder to try and coat things, but also it's going to set up a lot faster, and it's going to make it difficult for me to get over those thin spots. You can see I missed a little bit here and here, but it should be perfectly fine for what we're doing. I'll still be able to flip that and form it into a crepe, no problem. So here are all of my finished crepes. For me, the recipe made 8, so I'm assuming it'll make about the same amount for you. The last one I just had to scrape the rest out of the measuring cup and get that in, but it turned out to be a good amount. So now we're gonna just play around with forming them and doing a little bit of presentation. So here I have a little bit of powdered sugar. I got my Nutella. It was a little dried out, but I put it into the microwave for 30 seconds and now it's good. I have some chocolate sauce that was left over from when we were making chocolate sundaes over the summer, and I got some whipped cream. If you just have heavy cream, you can whip that up with either a whisk or in your stand mixer and just wait till you have stiff peaks. Add a little bit of powdered sugar to it. So for about 2 cups of heavy cream, you would need about 1/3 of a cup of powdered sugar and maybe a teaspoon of vanilla. So I hope this works out well because it's got one of those easy squeeze things and those suck sometimes. But anyway, one of the popular things in culinary arts for dessert presentation, you can just do little zigzags across your plate, and we'll try and do that with the chocolate syrup. So just like so. Okay, nice and simple. And I'm going to form my my crepe onto this board and then move it. Okay, if I try and put it on here, it's just going to make a mess. So all I'm going to do, grab one of these, put it down. It doesn't matter which side you use. And for me, I'm going to grab a little bit of Nutella and put that on there. For you guys, it just really depends on what you want to put in yours. If you decide to do a fruit filling or something like that, you just put that in and not have to worry about it. You can always put in some jam. I've seen people do peanut butter and jam crepes, and those are pretty good too. Just throw some of that in, and then put in some of my bananas. Right. So I don't need a lot. I just need to be able to give it some form. So I figure that's probably good. And then I'm just gonna make this into a little package. So let me get this out of the way real quick. Just switch. Okay, so I got my Nutella on there, got my bananas. I'm going to fold these over like so, and then just make a little package with that. Okay. All right, so now that I have this, right, so I want it to be pretty even. I'll just put that on here. Okay. And for a topper, I'm going to grab a little bit of powdered sugar just to put that on top. Okay, so it works out the best if you have a sifter because you get like a very light sprinkling. So I can do that on here. Okay, I find that if you give it a tap, it works better than if you shake it. Okay, so just give it some light taps around. There we go. It should melt into the chocolate, so you'll still be able to see that pretty well. And then I'm just going to grab my whipped cream. Just put a little bit on top. Like so. And then I can put some bananas across that as well. Okay, so let me just put some of those on like this. Like so. Okay, and there you go. You have your breakfast crepe. So there's different things that you could do for designs instead. If you're going to make your crepe a little bit differently, again, what you could do, let me just grab another one. Just gonna put some more Nutella down on this. Okay, this really does have a similar quality to making burritos or soft shell tacos, just in the way that it's made and folded. Okay, so for this one, I could put some more bananas on here. I can just kind of roll that one up like so. Okay. So if you wanted it to be more tubular instead of more flat, you could do that. Okay, let me show you a couple more decorating things. So here, with the chocolate sauce again, one of the things that people like to do is just get progressively smaller circles that are close to each other. Okay. So this is another really popular design that people like to do. Okay, for that one, now I can just put this on here. Sprinkle a little bit more sugar just in this area. Okay, and then you could just do something on the side if you wanted to with the whipped cream. So here I'll just put a little pile. And then I'm just going to grab a few more bananas. And then I can just put those on the side. So this would work out better. Oh, there we go. Well, this would have been better if I had selected ones that I had cut in a row just so that they all line up. Okay. So there you go. Here's a couple of just fun designs that you could do. It's really fun with people when you know, you come over or they come over and you just want to make something nice for them. People are really impressed with this sort of thing, and it really doesn't take a lot of work. Okay, so go ahead. You have, I guess, 6 more crepes, so feel free to play with it and put in a cool design if you want to, and just have fun with it.